I want you to guess something. Out of 530,000 student athletes competing in the NCAA, or the National Collegiate Athletics Association, how many do you think are transgender? President Charlie Baker of NCAA stated that the actual number is fewer than 10. That many people, that few of people, and one rule has caused one of the biggest political arguments in sports. Now, I've followed this policy and this argumentation, and I've seen or have viewed NCAA's own policy. I've looked at government reports and legal reviews. And today we'll go over what the policy is and why it's being contested. Then we'll see how the Republican Party views this issue. And lastly, we'll cover how the Democratic Party views this issue. Now, as of February 2025, NCAA's policy states that only athletes assigned female at birth are allowed to compete in women's sports, college sports. Now, this doesn't mean that trans women athletes are entirely cut off from the team. They're still allowed to practice and get the same medical care and benefits. The only thing is they are not allowed to compete. Now, it is also worth noting that this rule is one directional. So, while trans women are not allowed to compete in women's sports, trans men are allowed to compete in women's sports. And this is being contested because of Title IX, which is the federal law that bans discrimination, or gender discrimination in education. And Swarthmore's student newspaper, The Phoenix, has also mentioned that with this policy, athletes are still being required to sign a compliance form for the policy. Now that I've gone over what the policy is and why it's being contested, I'll cover how the Republican Party views this issue. Now, to put it simply, the Republican Party agrees with the policy. They fully support it, and that is because their reasoning for this is fairness in women's sports. This is due to their gender and anatomy and Seyfarth Shaw's legal analysis also pointed out that the policy for NCAA was adopted just one day after a related executive order was made. There was no coincidence since that legal analysis also states that the issue was aligned to be that way. The policy, yeah. There's also a no waiver part of this where athletes are not allowed to sign waivers to compete in women's sports for trans women athletes. There's also another thing is NCAA isn't the only organization to adopt this rule. According to Trans Athletes Tracker, NAIA, or the National Athletics Intercollegiate Association, also has adopted this with the same policy or a similar policy to NCAA. Now, the Republican Party's preferred action is to keep the policy, to not change it, and implement scholarship limits to so that only scholarships designated for women go to women and not trans athletes. So only athletes assigned female at birth. And with this, there's also the fact that trans women athletes on women's teams are reclassified and therefore are ineligible to compete. Now that we've gone over what NCAA's policy is, why it's being contested, and the Republican Party's view on this issue, I'll cover how the Democratic Party views this issue. The Democratic Party, to simply put it, they want to reverse this issue, and it is because the reasoning is discrimination. Under Title IX, the federal law for that bans gender discrimination, they make this impactful for the small amount of people, and this is to give it a more personal issue since it impacts these athletes more than we think. And the preferred action is to go by an old sport by sport model that doesn't use a blanket rule that goes across all NCAA sports, and instead kind of sort of to the Olympics, use it for only certain sports, and then also have a medical criteria for these individual sports, or college sports really. And that is the issue that's going on right now with college sports. I've gone over how the policy, or what the policy is, which is only female assigned athletes are allowed to compete in women's sports, and why it's being contested under Title IX, that is a federal law that bans gender discrimination. I've also gone over how the Republican Party views this issue and how they would like to keep it and set certain limits. And then lastly, I've gone over how the Democratic Party views this issue by wanting to reverse it and set criteria as well. And now that I've given you this information, you are able to go out and make your own decisions and opinions, and not just by looking at the first headline you see. And it's also pretty surprising how a small set of people are able to make a huge argument in the political world.